G'day everyone. So welcome to my new series. This is the very first of the number 19 series. It is important to actually lay the ground solid on this. So if you're watching any of my other videos and you're trying to understand what the database was that I'm basing my queries on, this video will explain it. So welcome to the number 19 series. In order for us to take a very pragmatic, very objective view of validating and verifying some of these quite amazing claims about scripture, mathematics, or numerology, and I've taken a view that I'll do the Quran, mathematics, and numerology interrogation and verification first. I've done another piece, why number 19 and why the Quran, why I have chosen to do the Quran first before the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, or the Greek New Testament. There is a video on that. Anyhow, let's get into the crux of this matter. How do we set up the SQL database, and how did I do it? Okay, so promise not to bore you to death with PowerPoint slides. There's probably just a couple of slides for me to talk through. Let's go up a page. The SQL, or the software that I've used, is predominantly Microsoft Excel, but that was just in the initial, just to get data in its flattened form before I imported into a normalized design in Microsoft SQL Server. So for the purpose of all the SQL queries, I'm using Microsoft SQL Server. SQL or SQL are interchangeable terms. Now, in terms of the database that I've set up, obviously I'm dealing with Arabic characters. So the collation for the fields where Arabic data is stored is that Arabic CIAIKS collation. It's basically I want to stay as close as possible to the Hija'i alphabet, Arabic alphabets. Now, in terms of where did I get my initial data sets and data sources, as you know, all Quran are the same in terms of the characters used, the number of verses, number of chapters, and all that. I found a site where Ayah Kitab had various data sources that were had the information that I needed. It had verse by verse, it has the Arabic text, and then it also had the transliteration, which is literally a English representation of every character in Arabic into English, which for purpose of verification and cross-check is really handy. So I use that one. I have noticed though that since that ayakitab.com is not available, if you click through you probably won't find that. I'm not sure, they have not renewed their domain, or something's not quite right. But anyway, there's various other places you can find the raw data. Now, one thing it didn't have was the translation, and you can go to the internet and search for translations of the Quran and you'll find lots of them. I needed one that had it in a data set so I could download it. Obviously, translations like Mamadou Pickthall or any other good translation. I happen to have used Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation. Like I say, it's not really important for the analytics. It's more if you ever need to understand the meaning, then it's useful, because my work really, I'm focusing on my strengths on IT and SQL, and using analytics to test out those various claims and phenomena that people have attested to. Now, what we'll do next is have a look at the design of the database, how I built it from a flat CSV or Excel into an entity based model. So if you are familiar with database design, you would have heard the term ERD, Entity Relationship Diagram. And the design that I have done is pretty much stock standard. So let's go over to, first of all, look at the Excel. Okay, So, like I said, just want to make that feel a little bit bigger so you can see. So that's where I got the data from, and then I merged it with the Yusuf Ali translation. Now, what does data look like? Now, as you can see, I've, I've only got so many verses here because I've got a filter on it. Chapter 1, and I was looking around, I think I was looking at chapter 96, also throw in chapter 114. So you can see the number of chapters in the Quran, if you didn't know already, is 114. And when I do that filter, you can see that I've got all my 3 chapters in here. The main thing is that you can see there's important attributes about a chapter, the number of words, more of that. I'll do additional verification later, but more importantly for me, I needed the Arabic text. I needed a transliterated text. I'll say that again. What that is not a translation. It's basically a representation of the Arabic. Let's zoom up a little bit more. Scroll across so you can see that. So the first verse in the book form of the Quran, as most people would know, is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And in the transliterated form, it is represented really well. The BSM represents the Ba, Sin, and Mim in Arabic. Now, there are some numbers, as you can see in here, and I'll explain that later. Maybe I'll explain it now. The 7 is actually representative of the heavier H sound. And the 3 over here is representative of the internal R sound instead of the flat A. So these, as long as the notation is 1 to 1, that's what I need. So I can kind of model that in my database, which I'll show you a little bit later, because I have a character table in which the Hijazi alphabets 1 to 28, which is the core and the essence of the original Arabic. They are obviously newer characters beyond 28 in Arabic, but there's the Hamza, which is represented by Alif. Anyway, a little bit more on that later. But for now, so this really, hopefully, from explaining to the viewer that the data that I got was pretty much in a what we call a flattened, denormalized way. There is no relationship. There's obviously this is representative of verse by verse, and it's got all the attributes that I need that I can build my entity model on. All right, so there are concerns and questions. Do fire it to me later on in the link below. Now let's go over to the database. Okay. Now, before I go to the database diagram, I just wanted to quickly show you what my initial thoughts were. This is a video that I put together, a crow's feed format of the database model. Now, if you've done this before, easy peasy, because anything to do with a database that underpins a software, for example, a CRM or a financial system, they are what we call entities. Right, if you were going and doing shopping in a shop, obviously there's a purchase, you're a customer buys many items, various products. These are all things that can be in a purchase. You're the customer, there's multiple products in your purchase. Those products are supplied by various vendors that the supermarket or the reseller is buying it from. So all of these are really modeled in the back end, so they can actually manage all the transactions and then basically do the reporting in the financials and everything else that a business needs to do. So similarly, in a model that I've done here is basically based on a book. Like if you look at a book has a chapter. Chapter is made up of sentences or verses. Every verse or sentence has a number of words, and each word has a number of characters. So that's essentially the idea, right? So in the Quranic, in the Quran's concept. It's a chapter. Now this is all the attributes of a chapter. Obviously there's 114 chapters. Each row in the chapter table will be depicting one of the 114 chapters. But the attributes, or the fields as we call them, it'll have an Arabic name. That'll obviously be a translated English name. Description. Now this is a concept where I've got a relationship between this chapter and the city it was revealed in. And I have a code for the city in here, but then there's a separate table for the city. So for example, in the Quran's case, it's essentially revealed in two cities, Mecca and Medina. So I've captured that in that relationship. Now there's a concept of these disjointed initials that form part of a certain number of chapters in the Quran, huruf muqatta'a. I've captured that in the design, but importantly on this side though, a chapter has a number of verses, right? It's a one-to-many relationship. Each verse, which is where the crux of all the information is, has got a verse number. Obviously that verse is from a chapter. Then there's an Arabic text to that verse. And then there's a transliteration, which is the representation of that Arabic in English. There's meaning field. Also, I've got other attributes, important attributes, whether that verse is the Basam, which is the Bismillah, which is usually the very first verse of the chapter. Interesting concept. The verse, the Bismillah for chapter 1 is counted as verse 1. All the other chapters, they're noted as verse zeros. The very first verse is the actual verse of the chapter, other than chapter 1. We'll get to that concept a bit later. And then there's other attributes that I've done, sort of aggregation that I've run later on to do word count, character count, all of that on a verse. Similarly, I've done that on a chapter as well. So these are a later run aggregate function, but in terms of pure attributes, there's a lot of fields where we capture that. Of course, there's the notion of words. There's various words. Words have a particular meaning. There's a transliteration of it. And then there's the essence of this character. Of course, words are formed by characters and verses are formed by characters, right? So the character table represents that. Now, I think I explained this before, the collation I've used is, you can use either of these two, it doesn't matter, but if you're not going to have Arabic collation at the database level, you've got to do it at the field level. Every field that is Arabic, you have to use that collation, otherwise you won't represent the Arabic characters properly. Okay, so that was my basic idea on the database design. What I ended up with was, when I started digging deeper into it, is this database item. So as you can see on my desktop here, that's the version of SQL I'm using. You can download SQL Server from Microsoft as a developer edition. I'm trying stuff. I'm obviously a past MCP. I had some privileges before, but Microsoft has ended its MCP program some time back. But anyway, I've still got some of those skills that I can utilize. Now, this is exactly what I ended up with. I've got Q chapters, which is basically the chapter entity. It's related to verses. I've got, in a way, I've run a aggregate stored procedure, which I'll show you in a second, which then goes through the verses and peels out all the words. It does a thing called geometrical. If you want to look up gematria, it's basically a value-based notation used both by the Hebrew and even probably the early Phoenicians. So basically every character is represented by a number value. Before they started using numbers, characters. It's like if you used to Romans I is 2, I is 3, so 4, and then V is 5. That's the idea. Now I've got a word count table. Again, that's an aggregate function. Character. That basically is I'll show you the tables in a second. It's a representation of the 28 Hijai alphabets used. Obviously, the data that I have has got some extra characters like the Hamza, um, which you aggregate them to two and a alif anyway, um, two and an A. Okay, the Revelation City, it's related that way. Basically, every chapter has a city that was revealed in, and I've got some attributes about the city. I'll show you in a second. And there's another aggregate table that I run to collect data. I literally do a lot of stuff around being able to tell anything about a character, for example, being able to know that that character B, if it was present in chapter number X, verse number 1, I'm able to tell what its position is in relation from the front of the Quran, from the back of the Quran, its position forward in the chapter or back from the chapter and within the verse and backwards within the verse. So there's a lot of things I've done that helps me do more analytics on the fly rather than have to run SQL all the time. Okay, on the left, hopefully you can see that. Right, cool. Now, just have a quick look at some of these tables. Like what I wanted to do was do a right click, and it's doing something weird. Right, if I select 1000 rows. Okay, so as you can see, it should have 114 because we know that there are 114 chapters in the Quran, and you can see Surah Fatiha. Al-Fatiha is the first chapter. Revelation City is 1. I'll tell you what 1 means. It has a Bismillah. It doesn't have these huruf al-mu'aqqat, the Arabic initials. It has some verse count and all these other attributes, right? Grammatical value of that entire chapter, what the chapter's other name is, English meaning is the opening, and I've got some various other calculations in here. Okay, so that's the chapters table. Then I have the verse table. Okay, just to show 1000, and obviously there's going to be a lot more rows than 1000 in this. It's limiting it to 1000 because we're doing a top 1000. But you can start to see the idea. If I just say, let's put a where clause in here, where chapter number is equal to 1. Let's run that again. You can see that I've got the, oops, don't know why I was doing that. Okay. So in here you can see that the 7 verses of the first chapter. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Basically, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. All of that's in there. And then all the attributes, obviously that's where the magical 786 comes from. So that's the value, grammatical value of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the opening verse of the book form of the Quran. So I have various attributes in there. Okay. Then I can show you the character count. Just getting a weird beeping. This goes. Okay. With the Arabic characters, you can see that I have got them in the Hijai order here, all the way to 28, and then there is that concept of the U, which is and Ya, which is used and described in the data set as a U, and then there's a Hamza character, which is of often used in place of alif, the A character. Anyway, so I've got both the Hijai order and Abjadi order. Basically, you can look that up. It's just a different way to represent the order in the Quran. The Hijai is as written, and the Abjadi is more people who are using conventional learning. They'll use that order. Anyway, so this is my character table, right? Now, a lot of the queries that I'll run, this word table is actually populated, so I can literally have a quick look at the word table. So the thing when the recording's on, that it's not letting me click through. But this word table, one to many words, and every word that is in the Quran, the Basam, for example, Allah, it traps the number of occurrences of the word, the geometrical value, and all that. So it's basically an analytical table for words. I've got a word count table, which is slightly different. Then basically it represents more every word in a chapter and a verse, and its position from the front of the Quran, from on the back of the Quran, then its position from the front of the chapter, the back of the chapter, and within the verse, what's its position backwards and forwards. So that's sort of like that word count table. Revelation City, it's nice and easy one. It's basically where was that chapter revealed. It has a relationship to it. I only have two cities, ID 1 and ID 2, Mecca and Medina. Basically some description here. It's more just for my benefit. For the analytics, it's more about the first three attributes. The Bakka is an alias of the Mecca. It's an interesting concept. Hopefully I'll do a video on why and how Bakka was used instead of Mecca. Perhaps there's a meaning to the nuanced appearance of it in the Quran. Obviously, the old name of Medina, the city of the Prophet, was Yathrib. So that's the city table, right? Now, also I have the raw table that was in that Excel before I normalized it. So you can see this should be representative of the Excel we were looking at before, right? So it's non-flat in a flattened format. Okay. Now, having said all of that, I think I've done some justification to the design that I've put together. Let's have a quick look at the char count table. I see again deeply analytical aggregate table for every chapter, every verse. I know which letter was used how many times, and what was the value in that chapter and verse. So this that char count table. The char F is a little bit more deeper than that. It's more positional based. Where was that character in reference to its position from the front of the Quran, the back of the Quran, back of the chapter, front of the chapter, and within the verse itself, and what was the character's ID. So I can do relationships to work out which character is where. Now, going back to our diagram, so all of those tables are basically represented through this entity relationship diagram here. Remember chapters, remember verse, remember word count, my three char tables here, and then I have got the relationship between chapters and city. But a lot of the heavy work is done in this table, the verses table, okay? So hopefully I've done justice to the subject of how my Q database. One thing I just want to quickly go through, which I realize I haven't described, is the stored procedures. I've written a whole bunch of stored procedures which allow me to do all the stuff that I have done. For example, let's have a look at this insert char count. Basically, it says it'll empty out the char count table, and for every record in chapter verse, it updates the checkout table with a counter. So you can see that it's a crawl function, literally curses through all the verses and through every chapter and works out various attributes and calculations. I'm not sure why the enter key is locked in, it's just pressing itself. And at some point in time, we either insert into the checkout table. Oops, we're happening with the keyboard. Okay, well, let's just escape out of that. I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that. Right. Similarly, I've got that word count stored procedure there, and I've got various other functions that I've written that allow me to do various other calculations quite easily, like the scalar functions I've got, which allow me to work out the nth word in a particular verse, or there's various functions that I use to work out um, positions of characters and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's my database. Now hopefully that helps you understand a little bit of this setup that I've got. There's no smoke and mirrors here. It's all pure data that's been normalized into a database format, which then essentially gives you the power of what we're really interested to do, which is to do SQL queries. Okay, so did the demo, that's done. So please subscribe to my channel to get the latest updates. If you like the video, please give it a like. Thank you. And you're pretty much all set and ready to watch the rest of the videos, because without this part, you'd be a bit lost in some of the other videos where we actually go live into the database. I'll try and make it as simple as possible, that when we're validating a particular phenomenon, it says, okay, I'm expecting to see this particular phenomena. I'll write a very simple query. I'll explain it to you what that query is doing, and then we will just, be there with the power of the tool at our hand. To not believe in people telling us this is so, and you go, oh, is that really true? My idea is that using this tool, you can pretty much validate any claim that somebody's making on a mathematical or numerical or numerological phenomena. Hopefully that is a nice segue to say go watch another video that is actually using this tool. Please post any feedback and comments. If you didn't understand anything, I'm quite happy to explain this. Send me a message on YouTube. Also, please remember, this is not a place for us to be rude and upset or angry about this. This is really a truth-seeking exercise in being very pragmatic and I don't know why, but my keyboard's gone all ballistic. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much. Salam and peace be unto you.